Welcome back, everyone. Just a quick introduction. I'm Troy. I'm the owner of Joseph Crowe Custom Audio. My middle name's Joseph, and that's basically why the company's called that. I'm joined by my identical twin brother again. Welcome.
Yeah.
So we have an improved microphone, improved camera, and so hopefully it's a little more enjoyable for you. So in this live stream, we're going to cover off some of the questions that we received earlier. I feel like maybe we didn't fully cover those, and then I'm going to show a screen grab of the Nighthawk in SolidWorks and just kind of go through some of the changes with that. And
if you have any questions, enter it into the chat. Now's the time to do it, and I'll be kind of moderating the questions, and Troy will be answering them.
Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to give Trevor actually an opportunity to just share a little bit about what he is actually doing. And he is full-time on our father's farm, and he is, well, just take it away.
I've been a partner on our family farm with my dad and my uncle for almost 3 years now. We have a large cash crop farm of about 5,500 acres here in Prince Edward County, Ontario, Canada. And I do. Well, farming is moving very fast in terms of the technology advancements. When we look at the use of nutrients, the timing of planting, everything is based on data. Much like what Troy does, he's very data driven and evidence-based decision making. And so I bring that to the farm, and we do everything not on guesswork. Well, sometimes it's guesswork, but most of the time it's what we've done for testing on our fields and our soils and our crops and our varieties and everything.
So it's very much technology based as well, which I feel like there may be an interest with some of the subscribers where when the equipment's actually running, so we have large farm equipment, and maybe if you gave a tour, in the cab of the combine or in the tractor, showing, what modern farming looks like.
Yeah.
So if you guys have an interest in seeing something like that, please let me know in the comments, and we can try to set up a quick high level. What does a giant combine do? What does it look like? How does it all work? So a little bit of a departure from audio, but I think it might be interesting. So, okay. So Trevor's going to read. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The first question that we have here is, it was asked in the comments from the last live stream, and second order harmonic distortion. Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
So as Troy is looking it up, have you watched any of Stephanie of Skunky Designs 2-amp build videos? She strives for second order dominant harmonic distortion and low third and fourth, etc. overall in her builds. And then second question that we'll get to as well, do you have any plans or maybe do a ranking of drivers that you tested?
Yeah.
Your testing is valuable, but it would be great to have more comparisons against drivers.
Yeah. Okay, so immediately I was reminded of the Mexing Mingda MC9R preamp test that I had done. And so you can see here it on my website. And so what I like to do is correlate the measurements to the subjective listening and finding what I prefer as far as what test metric is strongly correlated to what we enjoy listening to. And so that's okay. So this was a review of the preamp Mexing Mingda, and so it was basically devoid of any real dominant distortion artifacts. It's just a very low distortion, clean sounding preamp, and so it didn't add any of that typical tube warmth sound. And so what I did in this blog is you can see the data here and how you see it's not until you get really high in the gain on the preamp that you start to see the second order coming in. And so if you compare that against the Dawn Sax preamp, which subjectively it definitely adds that tube warmth to the sound, and it doesn't detract from overall overall clarity, but it just does something to the music. It just kind of ties it all together. And so at the end of this blog post, H2 dominant, H3 below that, and then H4 basically almost down into the noise floor. And so that is what I call the ladder effect, and what I've kind of correlated as I test various both loudspeakers and preamps and amplifiers. I've correlated this kind of ladder effect to what I actually prefer subjectively: rich, warm, musical, doesn't have any detriment to overall clarity. Like I've said in the past, that I find that H2 is pretty benign in terms of any harmful effects to the overall sound quality, but it actually improves kind of the body and richness and smoothness to the sound. So I mentioned too, as well as with speakers, that's also a characteristic trait that I have discovered correlates to the actual sound quality. And so another example of that, in what we discussed last time, was not what we're seeing here. We're seeing the actual driver having H2 dominant and having that same ladder effect. And so this is the CS CA26 RFX woofer. It doesn't have any copper shorting rings in the motor structure or anything like that, but it does have a very desirable overall sound quality. Further reinforce that, another blog post that I had done recently was with the ScanSpeak 21W855. So this is a 8-inch, and it does have the symmetrical drive motor technology from ScanSpeak. So there's copper in 3 different locations inside the motor, physical sounding mid-woofer. And so you can see again that ladder effect. So this is just something that I've observed. You know, it's just correlating, and it's not something that I can prove, but it is something that I personally look for when evaluating equipment. So the next, that was a 2-part question to each other. Your favorite? Yeah. Drivers. Yeah, and then Audio Science Review. And so those are strictly review sites where they conduct driver testing in a fixed environment and publish, you know, and they're just extremely well done, how it is an archive, a database of, you know, that we're designing. And so we are basically testing whatever is on the test bench for the specific in-house design development goals. And so it's not like I'm buying, you know, 10 different 5-inch drivers to do a big comparison. If we find a driver that we really like, then that's the one that we're going to test and try to find out how we can get the best out of that particular driver, if it's sealed, bass reflex, and that. So So the next thing, Trevor, was there any other questions that we wanted to cover?
Yeah, there was just some comments about the sound cutting out, so I'll just
okay. The
dealing
sound's
with that
cutting
right
out
now.
Sound's cutting out.
Do you know why it would be cutting out? I turned this down a bit. It's
So the next thing
sounds fine on my phone. Okay, I did turn it down a bit. If it's flashing green there, is that peaking?
I'm not sure if it's related to that.
Okay.
But just keep us updated in the chat if it's a consistent problem there. I'm not.
Yeah, I turned it. I'm gonna turn it down a bit more, and then turn the gain up on here.
Okay.
Do you have gain on the? Just bear with us a sec. Do you have gain on the live stream just to check that? So yeah, that looks perfect. Okay. It might be our internet. Could it be the internet as
It
well?
possibly could be. Just see here. We're still learning on this, so if anybody has any comments on how to improve that, we're using OBS Studio there, and so it might be a setting related to that.
Yeah, that looks good.
Audio bitrate. I might be able to maybe drop this down. It might.
Yeah, drop the audio bitrate down. The volume looks good. It's just the. And let me just check. Are you hotspotting your phone?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm gonna. Can I unplug it and just put it by the window?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep. And why compression driver and regular driver. For those who have been following my blog posts and YouTube videos, you'll already know that, and we've mentioned the DCM 50 is my favorite compression driver for its overall musicality and warmth. And then there's also the SP Acoustics 65 CDNT, which is a titanium 2.5 inch diameter voice coil, and so it's a excellent compression driver. Both of those drivers are not cheap as far as the DIY, and being, you know, I think a lot of the DIY enthusiasts are looking for something on the cheap. So I guess it should be, you know, those are kind of the high end for me. There's also TAD, which is commercially available. It's, you know, a custom order out of Japan. That's kind of the upper. You can get similar performance with just using, you know, the DCM 50, for example. I would put it up against any of the TAD products. So, so then, as far as the low end of the spectrum for, you know, full range drivers, the FE108NS full range driver is very nice in the backloaded horn for low level near field listening. That's one that really stands out to me as being an excellent overall full range in its 4-inch category.
What Fostex full range do you have on that waveguide one?
Okay, so that's the 1928 shallow horn.
And is that here?
No, I don't have it actually. We made 2 pair of the 1928 shallow. There's the search field at the top that you can always just quickly search for specific things. So this is the Fostex FW85WK, I believe. I might have butchered that, but yeah. So this was
It's very small.
It's a less
It's
than
2 inch?
3 inch. Yeah,
2.5
it's
inch.
it's 2.5 around that. And so this driver in this shallow horn, it's always in the context of, you know, what enclosure, what horn. I find that that's going to play a very critical part. This had excellent overall musicality detail and breakup free, right? Oftentimes the issue with 4-inch drivers is that you're into the breakup, into the treble, and so you're relying on the internal dampening of the diaphragm to, you know, to compromise. This didn't seem to have any of that compromise, in that the breakup was, you know, 18 kilohertz, And so with some pretty significant EQ to flatten the response, and I believe I had the crossover point at around 150 hertz down.
Okay.
So it was using the bass cabinet coming in at 150 hertz, and then it was the horn mouth was 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters, so it presented a large image, and because of the large horn mouth there. So
one thing I liked about this was that compared to a typical two-way speaker where you're crossing over at like 2 kilohertz at that critical mid-range, this is producing like 95% of the vocal range, and then so it's really is a point source, almost like a coaxial design.
Yeah.
Where all of the sound is coming from that full range driver, and the bottom end is just filling it in quite nicely.
Yeah.
So that driver retails for what, like under, like it's probably $120 or something like that.
They're
So-
relatively affordable, and if you're interested in just even the 3D CAD file, I don't have it on my site, but if you're interested in 3D printing, I just bought a 3D printer that can actually print that size of a horn as one piece. And so if you're interested in something like that, the other thing with this project is the horn allowed it to play much louder and much lower distortion than just on its own, right?
Yeah,
And so
don't be
you're
afraid that it's a little 2.5 inch.
yeah,
driver.
it was able to
It was
play
phenomenally
fairly
loud.
it maintained the dynamic range there. And
Okay, so the next question in here, don't see a lot of product offerings on crossovers, but do you offer crossover design, or how does that process work? If someone wants a crossover, I guess for their existing system, or
yeah, that's I as my business transitions and grows, it's becoming harder and harder to do custom crossover design. It was already very difficult to do crossover design because I actually needed the drivers here I actually needed the finished speaker here, whether I built a prototype or the customer sent me the finished speaker, because the crossover is the last leg of the development where you're going to do so it logistically with shipping and the risk of damage of that kind of thing, the customer takes on a risk that I found. I get a lot of inquiries about doing crossover design, but once the customer realizes what's actually involved, then it becomes a real obstacle, which is why when it comes to the DIY side, it really is advantageous if you can kind of bite the bullet and do crossover design yourself. And that was, I took way too long personally taking that step and getting into crossover design. It was a real head scratcher for a long time, which actually this segues really good into when I was discussing in the last live about the books that I've read. So there's a book that you really should consider. I'm going to go through here, and it's available from Parts Express, and it's called Testing Loudspeakers by Joseph D. Apolito. I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, but so this is an older book. It's kind of right when the FFT measurements came out and was affordable to purchase a measurement system. And so this book's probably 2 decades old, but the fundamentals are there, and it helps you understand. I get a lot of questions from I'll get people sending me measurements of their system, and 9 times out of 10 they've measured their speakers with the speakers in the listening, like in the listening position, right? Like in their setup in their system, and then their microphone is like at their listening chair. And that's a very common mistake. I routinely have to tell people, no, your speakers actually, if you're doing loudspeaker measurement, move the speakers into the middle of the room and set them up on a stand so that you have any potential sidewall, ceiling, floor reflection is as far away as possible, so that you can do a gated measurement so that you're just measuring the speaker.
And what's gated measurement for those who don't know?
Gated measurement means that when the speaker emits the test signal, it
hits the mic first.
It hits the mic, but then you need to turn the mic off and that's what the gating does. Is it's like a gate. It shuts the mic off before the other reflections in the room reach the microphone.
So there needs to be enough of a separation between the initial sound
Yeah.
and the reflected sound so that you can
Yeah.
clearly see where to kill it.
Yeah, and so generally speaking, 1 foot or 30 centimeters is 1 millisecond. So if you have your speaker away from generally I find that if you can get any of the reflections at least 3 feet away, that means you're going to have a 3 millisecond gate. And so you can set that up in REW or in ARTA. Unfortunately, ARTA is no longer supported, which is frustrating. But in REW, the measurement software, which is free, which is what most people are using, the default gate is, I think, like 300 milliseconds. And that's because the REW as a software is intended to be used for room measurement. But we don't want to measure the room. We want to measure just the speaker. And so you have to actually tweak a lot of the settings, out of the box. You have to tweak a lot of the settings in REW to get it so that you're using the software for speaker measurement. And so speaker in the middle of the room, reflections as far away as possible, which is why I have this giant pedestal to put the horn in the middle of my shop. And so I'm using a 11 millisecond gate, which is 11 feet.
And every wall is probably 11 feet
yeah
away.
Yeah, and so the other thing with that is that the longer the millisecond you can get your gate, then the more resolution you can get into the lower frequencies. So for testing tweeters, for example, you can get away with like a 3 millisecond gate because you're just testing that upper part of the frequency. And the reason for that difference between being able to measure treble versus lower mid-range is the wavelength of sound. Okay, so the lower frequencies have a longer wavelength, and so to get the resolution in the bass, you have to get your room reflections much further away. So an 11 millisecond gate means that I'm able to get resolution down to 500 hertz, which is really good. And then below 500 hertz, if you want to get really good measurements, and this is covered in this book, where you can do ground plane measurement. So you place your speaker on the floor, you put your mic on the floor, and there's, it discusses in the book about how far the mic needs to be based on the size of your speaker. And when I read this book, it's like, yeah, that's a thing. Ground plane measurement is a thing. So you can be confident, if you want to share your test setup on the forums, on social media, you take a picture of your test setup, you have the mic on the floor. Yes, the book covers that. It's a legitimate way of measuring your speaker. It's very good at eliminating, room modes in your measurement. And so you really need to get, deep dive on this book and understand, what are the standard measurement practices so that you can feel confident when you share your measurements, and on the forums and that. And, standard 50 dB vertical scale is another big one where REW again, it does not come out of the box with a standard 50 dB vertical in the measurements. It's I think like 100. So it really embellishes your test results. It makes your frequency response.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, it's perfectly flat, and then you look at the scale and it's
120 dB. So that's a big
the
thing.
same with smoothing as well. It's like, look how smooth it is, but they have what's the smoothing that's typically default.
So the REW defaults to some smoothing. I think it's like 12 dB, or it looks maybe like 6 dB. I'm not sure. And it's a little bit tricky to find in the settings where to actually change that. There is a shortcut.
That's okay. We don't need to get into that detail.
Okay, well, yeah, I do.
I'm keeping Troy on track because
I'll go way off into the weeds.
He's going to get into the weeds here. He's going to lose viewers when he gets too technical. Anyway, don't do too much smoothing. Moving on.
Yeah, no smoothing, 24 dB. But I do want to do a video on how to set up REW for loudspeaker measurement. Go through each of the settings. So that would be good. And I think I may switch to REW if I can get. I have done it in the past where I've done a side-by-side and gotten the exact same results between ARTA and REW. And so that I think would be good, is to show how to get the same test results.
All right, another book that you can go to?
Yeah, so in the last live I mentioned about, the various books. So I'm just going to touch on some of the books that have really influenced me. So we've already covered the loudspeaker testing book. This book, it's fairly costly to buy new. It's the handbook, loudspeaker and headphone handbook, and it's a very large book, very expensive, and it has a lot of theory. And so I've had this for quite a while.
And it's almost $400.
Yeah.
Canadian.
So I bought my book used. This book's been out for quite a while, so you can possibly find it on the used market online, and I think I paid like $80 for it. So that's something to consider on this one. But I mean, this dives down into a level that is just, this really opened up a lot for me as far as my understanding of, what matters. It covered a lot of the math at the beginning, and so at first I was like, why are they doing this? And it really actually, if you look at it, it helps you understand. The most important thing to pull out of that is what matters and what doesn't. What are the variables when you look at like a driver design and it feels small parameters, and what impacts. For example, there's a lot of questions about fast bass, and there's a lot of assumptions about what makes fast bass. And when you look at the parameters of a driver and all of the physical, electrical, acoustical parameters, and you can see kind of how they interact with one another, and that I think helps understand what it's good to know what doesn't matter when it comes to speakers. So okay, so we touched on this a little bit in the last live about Floyd Toole's work and understanding acoustics, and so this in the NRC, National Research Council,
National Research Council,
in Canada here. And so double blind testing and finding which speakers are preferred. And so general conclusions in that specific chapter of the book is that listeners preferred wide coverage versus narrow coverage. And so
there's a lot of detail in it about the effects of room acoustics on human perception of speakers, and the perception of a sound stage and that sort of thing as well. Right?
Yeah. This is where I got when I refer to perceived source width and perceived source depth. These are all terms that I basically learned this from this book, right? Where it's using certain, that's the issue when people are waxing poetically about the subjective nature of a speaker. Well, that needs to be standardized. And I feel like this book really does help, as far as the blind testing surveys and being able to pick terminologies that we can all kind of generally understand. And that's really important, right? When I say something sounds, smooth, what does that mean, right?
Or fast.
Yeah.
So people say subs aren't fast. Well, I'm trying to explain what I'm hearing, but or soundstage depth, like you mentioned depth, and I've heard a lot of people or read a lot of skeptical people on forums that are objectionists that there's no such thing as soundstage depth, and yet our ears may say otherwise, right? I don't know.
Well, I hear many reviewers say the speakers have great soundstage,
right?
And I'm immediately thinking, well, can you qualify that further? Because I've heard speakers either have one or the other as far as the width or the depth, right? And so the only, if I was to criticize anything about this book, when you look at they had, I think, 3 pairs of speakers that they used for the blind testing. They had an electrostatic speaker, and then they had what they would consider wide coverage speaker. So I would say that the speakers that they actually used, they didn't actually have a speaker like what I produce, which is controlled but wide coverage. We're talking 90 to 100 degrees. They didn't include that, as far as I can tell, when you look at the specific speakers used in the test. So it's a little bit incomplete, I feel, as far as what you can derive as far as listener preferences on speakers. But when it comes to the psychoacoustic aspect, it's just mind-blowing how in-depth they get on for example, perceived source width and the psychoacoustic aspect of that and how our brains interpret the sound. So very, very highly recommended on that.
So we do have a question about what's in the background.
Okay.
What's in the background there? I think
So-
they're referring to that.
So these here are, I just finished them yesterday. They're the 1695 open baffles in cherry, and those are going to be finished this coming week for a local customer here in Prince Edward County. And I very rarely get
Local.
very rarely get anybody in Canada. Previous project went to Belgium, and then Singapore, and that. So yeah, he's coming this coming Friday to pick up those open baffle speakers, and so we've got our work cut out for
Yeah,
us.
I was gonna say you better get your
Get cracking on that.
And then someone had asked, have you ever considered making those available as just selling the baffles? Would you consider selling baffles for the 1695 speakers or others?
Well, we do have the DIY plan. Since the last live, I published the 1695 people looking for a way to get the product for just cheaper, and for people that aren't DIY, that are just looking to get it for cheaper, right? And so this is the product on my site. It's called the 2812, and it's based on the 1695 design. And so you can see here that it has the same overall appearance, same dimensions. It has the same 9-degree tilt. And then the horn is 3D printed and then installed. And I had some people complain, well, I don't really like fill it all in and make it perfectly smooth. Personally,
Right.
I mean, that's something I would enjoy doing, right?
Yeah.
Like just getting it to look amazing. And so, yeah, I don't think anybody should just use the raw 3D printed part, but it forms a basis of being able to finish it and paint it and make. I've seen people do incredible things when it comes to the 3D printed parts. And also, you can buy the acetone spray box that you place the part in the box and it mists it with acetone and it smooths it all over.
Wow.
So that's another option. I've never done it, but it is something that you might want to look at and see if that can also improve the overall finish there. So the DIY plans, I have options here if you want to include the crossover components, include the drivers, and then we can also 3D print the horns here, and so you can just pick the options that you need. So this is for Canada and US customers. It basically, the drivers and the crossover components get drop shipped, so it's shipped directly from Matasound. So if you're in the US, it's free shipping. It stays in the US as far as it going from Matasound directly to your address. So
I think you're being very flexible and accommodating to the DIY community, especially when you have put a lot of R&D into this product as well. So.
Nobody is offering their, as far as I know, nobody offers their speakers as a DIY.
Yeah,
I don't
at least they
think.
start out doing that, and then they.
Yeah.
So a question: do you use a rotating table for your off-axis measurements? And
Yep.
you did touch on that before, but I mean, right behind us is a massive Lazy
Yeah,
Susan.
actually. So just there are plans on my site for a small rotary table, and so this is something that I've been using for I think 3 years now, and it uses piano hinges to be able to turn your speaker. And so when I developed this, I picked a very large stand mount to.
Can you make that bigger?
Sure.
People can see. There we go.
Yeah. So I used a very large stand mount, so it accommodates. This is the 1 cubic foot Dayton Audio, the MTM enclosure, and so it's a fairly large stand mount box. And so if you're only doing small this size of a DIY project, then this is really good. It looks more complicated than it actually is, because it's but once you get into the drawings, it's fairly straightforward because I offer the drawings include each individual part has its own drawing. And so then at that point, after you've cut all the individual pieces, it's just a matter of Lego. Putting it all together, construction glue and some brad nails and that. So there's that. And then I do have a large 4 foot by 4 foot rotary table that's based on using just off the shelf caster wheels that are fixed that just kind of allow it to pivot. And I could offer the plans for that. Let me know in the comments if that's a plan set that you'd be interested in. It's very easy build, and it'll accommodate huge speakers. It's very so there's
people are saying the sound is cutting out when there's a lot of movement on the screen, like scrolling or so that tells me your bit rate is very limited on your not.
Might lose the feeders.
Yeah. So we're half the bit rate that's still going to be okay, I think. Bear with us, folks.
That's good. We're getting questions. Thank you, everyone. It's nice to get that interaction. So
just going back to the books, you've talked about some books.
Floyd's book's incredible. I'll also mention that Aaron from Aaron's Audio Corner did an interview with Floyd Toole over a year ago, and I strongly encourage you to watch that. Really insightful, interesting, just to hear Floyd talk, as a person, and you feel like he's just a genuinely amazing guy. So, and Aaron mentioned in the video that he hopes to have him back, and yes, Aaron, if you're out there, definitely invite Floyd back onto your channel. That he needed to go back and read some of the chapters of his own book because he wanted to kind of freshen up and I think we can.
That's normal with any author. You have to go back and reflect and remember. Oh yeah, I did say that. So there was another book there.
Yeah. So recording studio design, and this. That is very beneficial for audio enthusiasts as far as room acoustics. It touches on loudspeakers quite a bit and goes into a surprising in-depth, on horn speakers and that kind of thing. And so
so can we stop hotspotting your phone? Will that help? Like, is out sometimes.
Okay, so I'll try not to do too much on the screen. Although I did want to discuss the look at some of the changes to the Nighthawk there. So I don't know if that's a good time to go on to that, unless there's other questions that we can cover. Oh, one thing I did want to talk about. So this here.
Yeah, a lot of people have been waiting for this.
I'm gonna put it up there. So this is the third gen of the multi-cell, 1929, and so it took 3 days to print, and then I have some test data for you guys to share. So I literally tested it earlier today on the pedestal rotary table, so I have some polar data, and so I can bring that up and show you guys. So the compression driver that I'm using is the RCF ND950. Okay, I took the throat adapter off the compression driver, so it's actually a 1.4 inch throat, and it's using a 4-inch titanium diaphragm on this. So
how did you 3D print it? Like, how was the orientation? Just so
I was face down on the printer, and it was printed as one piece.
So people saw that picture last session.
So there was supports coming off of it So if it's
Right.
printed like this, there's supports coming off of it. So it took a bit of time to break off all the supports, and it ended up, you can see there, it ends up being pretty clean. Probably could clean it up a bit more.
Yeah.
But, and then the only other thing was the flange was printed as a second piece and then glued on. So, because otherwise
Yeah,
I would
you
have had
can't-
to have like supports coming
You
down
can't
here.
print
and
out
there.
sideways like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Okay, so let's see the measurements.
Okay, so this is just the raw frequency response at around 1.3 meters. And so,
Make it big. Let's fill the screen. Yeah.
so yeah, so this is, I haven't even looked at this very closely, but I mean, there's going to be a falling response by virtue of it being very, very wide coverage. So this, you see the kind of the same thing with constant directivity horns, where you're getting very, very wide coverage. And so there's
Right.
going to be a
So you're-
falling energy.
you're- instead of a focused on axis high frequency response where you can extend it out on axis, this is the multi-cell is pushing those high frequencies off to the side.
That's
so you're
right.
reducing the volume.
So there's less energy directly on axis.
Right.
That energy into the room,
It's being distributed.
it's being distributed into the room, and so the mic isn't picking that up.
right.
But perceptively it'll sound like that. But you have to flatten this response with a high pass filter. So I do show that here. Oh, maybe it's just in Arda. I didn't save it yet. I'm not sure. Yeah, I just have it in Arda. Still, I haven't saved it out.
Can you move it over? We're here, so people need to see the values on the screen. Yeah, good. Is that okay? Yeah.
So the red is the raw response. The green is with a 2.2 microfarad capacitor, just in series with it. So you can see how that kind of gets the response flatter. I did some quick listening with this green response, and it sounds really good.
So that's 5 dB on the mid. You dropped it by how many dB?
There's
It's like
over
10.
over 10 dB
Wow.
fall in the, and then it results in a steeper.
Right.
Once you get to the cutoff of the horn, it falls steeply.
So was this designed as a 1 kilohertz horn or a 500 hertz horn cutoff? Or you didn't really know until you tried
I think
it?
as far as crossover point, we'd have to look at the polar data to know. Axis colored polar map. And so for those that don't know, you have the on axis normalized horizontally through, and then as you move off axis, you get different shading to represent the output of the driver or the horn as you move off axis. And so this is characterized by 120 degree coverage. So it's and the coverage is dictated by the minus 6 dB down point. As you move off axis, the response is going to fall. And so you're going to be looking at around the yellow to green area, which you can kind of see it's pretty defined around this area in the treble. And if you go back, you can see minus 60 degrees. So that's 120 degree listening window there, even into the upper treble. There is some narrowing in the mid band that is not really too concerning for me. But yeah, the sound is very, very wide and spacious. There's no coloration that I was getting with I guess your multi-cell. And with the Gen 2 multi-cell, the one that I showed in the last video, it had a major dip on axis at 5K.
Right.
Which this one actually, so this doesn't seem to have that.
Can you go back to the off-axis response? One thing you should note, on this is that you're picking up, these bands are going to be, as you're rotating it, the microphone is getting into the center of the multi-cell squares, where it's projecting out fingers of high frequency.
Yeah, that was very much so
With this?
No, it's no, because if
Okay.
you go back and look at the blog posts that I had done on your Yeah, it does. See there.
Oh, it's horizontal.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, because it's the vertical axis is the degree.
Yeah. The sound changing, like somebody's taking an equalizer and moving it as you're walking around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what this shows, is that phenomenon. So where with this, you move off axis, and yeah, there's some peaks and dips in relation to the on axis, but it's
Right.
not going to change. Like I
Right.
walk around and it sounds the same, and
Almost the same from 120 degrees. Like if you're
Yeah.
saying 120
yeah,
degrees,
and it's like that. I was 60 degrees off axis, and you can move your head like a foot, and then it just drops. Like the whole output just drops, and that's what you're seeing here. It just drops.
Right.
So the other measurement that I wanted to show is just, this is the typical one that I do show, which is red is on axis, and then we got 15, 30, and then 45 off axis. And so you can see it's not the smoothest result, but relative to, as far as the category of multi-cell, this is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So, and then you're also plan. There's just trying to think. Okay, so there's the I thought it would look cool with the. I might just have to go to my blog. Something that I thought would look really cool is this project here. The bass cabinets that I used for this test. It's I think it's
About
around
the same baffle.
it's like a 12-inch cube
right.
with an 8-inch driver on a speaker stand,
Yeah.
and then with the multi-cell sitting on top.
Yeah, that would look cool.
So I mean, that's already an excellent sounding driver that's clean up to 2 kilohertz. And like this, yeah, like you could use the 8-inch and
Up
then
to
come
1K.
in,
Yeah.
800 hertz crossover
Yeah.
coming in, and I mean, it would look like quite a statement.
Printed. That's cool too.
Yeah. Offering with a pretty simple build and a speaker that's going to be a discussion piece in your home. People are going to immediately be drawn to it and be like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
So
No plywood. A more broader question would be MDF versus plywood, and then which plywood?
yeah. So I can only correlate my subjective listening on various boxes that I've built, and I've had much higher success rate with good sounding enclosures when it comes to the Baltic birch plywood. I've built a number of boxes out of MDF. Some of them sound good. Some of them actually sound very lifeless and dead.
But isn't that a good thing?
No. What I mean to say is that it seems to suck out the dynamics out of the music. And audibly to the sound signature that you're hearing. So, I mean, you can do either material. You just need to make sure that you're bracing it enough. And I will say, Baltic birch plywood is 4 times stiffer than MDF. You know, the modular. The other factor is the weight of it, and MDF is heavier than the plywood, but that's not going to play a significant role in that. So
you basically would have to get 4 times more MDF to get the same stiffness as plywood.
It's not 4 times, right? It's the bending moment. If you get into the engineering side of it,
yeah,
we just said
double the weight to get it.
well, it'd be
same
significantly heavier, right?
Yeah.
And that's why in the Pro Sound they use Baltic birch plywood, you know, because it's
and
lighter.
good quality, quality plywood. Like you've had issues with like voids or rattling.
Yeah, we've had issues with supply getting good quality. You can't really get Baltic birch. The is you know, it's not near the quality, and so that's something that we've had to work through and make sure that we're getting the real stuff. So
Oh, we have another Altec question.
oh dear.
Well, the 604. So, that's not a question. It's one of your customers, Carlos from Mexico. He says he hasn't finished the cabinets for his GPA 604 yet. He'll send a picture when it's done.
Okay.
That's good. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, I think people might be interested to see the latest version of the Nighthawk.
Yes.
So this is, I have it open already in SolidWorks here. And so we have an order right now. It's going to be something we're going to be working on for the next 3 or 4 months. And so this is the latest design, Gen 3. And so it uses base reflex for the base modules instead of what I had before, which is 15-inch rye pole, like a slot type open baffle. And so this is going to be, the base modules are based on an existing design that I've been actually using in my home theater for a number of years. And so it's dual 12-inch passive radiators with 12-inch, and it's using the, I can just click it here, I'm not sure.
So the sides are passive radiators?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's using the Dayton Audio RSS 315 high output. And so each base module, there's the 2 modules, upper and lower. And so each module has the 500 watt FA 501 plate amp. So it's a hybrid of active and passive. It uses active on the bass and then passive on the mid frequency and mid and high frequency. So and then instead of the ViaWave ribbon tweeter that was used in the Gen 2, it's now using a 1-inch compression driver. And so the crossover point going to be housed, because the crossover is such a simple affair, it's just housed in this central column. And the legs are the main kind of focus right now, and looking at how to do the legs in a way that matches the rest of the speaker. The previous legs out, and that provides enough rigidity, but we wanted something that was more substantial in the overall appearance. And so the legs here we're looking at casting that from low gravity sand casting.
Oh, that's cool.
So this is the leg. You can see here it's 10 millimeter wall, and it's, you know, the leg design is the same for all 4 legs.
So that'll be
secure the plinth using screws on the inside.
where you won't see the shear cut of metal or sheet metal or anything either. It'll be
Yeah,
a cast look.
yeah, much more substantial appearance. Kind of matches the overall kind of beefy look to it there. So that's one of the changes. The other change that we were looking at is this rear cover that just kind of tidies up the wiring going to the bass cabinets, and because the Hypex FA 501 you can set it up, you know, and so I'll be doing on-site setup, and I'll be using my microphone to, you know, account for do the EQ for the room modes and positioning the speakers space with his music over the course of like a day or two, and, you know, asking him, you know, how does this sound, and getting it to where he's happy. That's, you know, where this is at as far as the ultimate and sound quality. You have to account for what the customer, you know, what is just his preference is, right? Because you know, age and, you know, hearing deterioration and things like that, so you got to account for that. So
I guess when you are other manufacturers doing that, when you get into that price bracket, you get obviously the setup for free.
Yeah.
No, not free, but no charge, and they.
As far as I know,
Yeah.
as far as I know, it's something that's offered, so it can become invaluable when you're really down to, you know, brass tacks on
fine tuning.
Yeah.
Fine tuning it.
So
I can imagine every room is going to be so different in terms of getting the balance right for the sound, and especially the bass.
upstream equipment.
Yeah.
He wants to swap out various amplifiers. He has the condo amps and that. So these are 99 dB sensitivity anechoic. So his condo amps will just sound amazing because it's active on the bass, and so you're not taxing your amplifiers with the current electrical current requirements to reproduce the
drive
bass.
those woofers.
Yeah. So from my testing, if you can eliminate the amplifier from having to reproduce the bass frequencies, then it really reduces intermodulation distortion, where the bass frequencies actually modulate up into the mid range and reduces the overall clarity in the mid range and treble as a result of the amplifier having to reproduce those bass frequencies. So definitely something that we've objectively measured as a benefit. So
IMD distortion would be a great topic for a future video.
yeah,
That was one thing you learned early on, is like total THD, total harmonic distortion, wasn't really a true indicator of what sounded good. It didn't sound
There's
good.
almost an inverse correlation to harmonic distortion. Like it's kind of crazy, but
so there's still some comments about the sound, and we do apologize. We'll make sure that we have good internet next time.
yeah, we'll work on that.
A lot of excitement about the multi-cell. I should have had the questions ready. Sorry. Sorry. I'm not doing my job. I know there's lots of discussion in the chat that are not questions, so I'm having to filter through it. But did you you've touched on a lot of things you wanted to talk about, the Nighthawk and the multi-cell. Was there anything else? You do have your list of questions there. I'm trying to remember if we've caught all those questions.
So we did the multi-cell.
Yeah. Favorite speaker driver?
I do watch Skunky. She's amazing, and it's amazing. There's a lot of overlap. She builds tube amps, and she's now got her own line of tube amps, and it's interesting to see her develop her business and encountering the same challenges, that I've had. Measurements to subjective listening. So I definitely encourage you to check out her channel.
Mm-hmm. And I think some people may be seeing this massive horn in the background.
Yeah.
I'll move out of the way. I did make you go full screen there, but is this a public project that you've shared before?
I believe it is.
I think it's hilariously big for a solid walnut horn.
So this is the two.
And I'll walk over here just so you can get a sense of the scale of it. It's like to my waist. So it's in 4 pieces, made in 4 pieces on the CNC machine.
I'm trying to remember. I think it's the 281.
I'm putting him on the spot because I didn't plan on.
No, that's okay. I'm trying to remember the number.
Maybe I'll check the model number on the back.
Yeah. So it's for a customer in Los Angeles, and it's a kind of a long-term project because he wants the compression driver developed. And so we're in the middle of doing that. I'll grab the compression driver. Yeah, just a second.
Yeah, so if you go here or back there, they can see it.
Oh, just hold it up.
Yeah, that works too.
So here's the compression driver that was 3D printed. It's got kind of the central vane radial phase plug, 125 millimeter diameter throat. And then inside of this, I'll grab the actual mid driver.
Do you have it there?
Yeah.
Off here.
So inside of that compression driver is a 10-inch 18 sound
With
mid.
magnets.
Yeah. So this is the specific model is the 10 NMBA 520. And you can see here, it actually has the input terminals for the driver, but then it has this lead, I'll have to show you. So the input terminals send to the voice coil, but then there's actually another set of wires that go into the pole piece, the hollowed out pole piece. And there's another coil of wire that compensates for inductive rise, okay? And by eliminating, inductive rise, you're going to get lower distortion. And so this driver is very clean. Breakup, I think, is very, very high. I'd have to look at the spec sheet.
So a 10-inch that goes up to 5K, you're saying on a normal 10-inch driver, there's a natural roll-off from the inductance created by the voice coil.
Yeah.
But this is using a network in a circuit inside of it to compensate for that inductance that the voice coil is causing the roll-off.
Yeah, so
now you're remembering what it's called.
I did do.
So hit 2 because I changed it.
MB. Oh,
yeah. Did you get it?
yeah. I'm not sure.
See what comes up.
Yeah, it's right here actually. So I did feature this on my blog. I should be on 2.
Yeah, 2.
Yeah. So you can see here the spec sheet for the specific driver. The impedance is perfectly flat. Breakup is starting to occur at around 3K. So I did test this a while ago on a 200 hertz cutoff horn. And so what I found was that there was just this immediacy to the sound and through the mid bass region that was better than most compression drivers that I've heard. And so this formed the basis of the 2118 horn, using that driver with a phase plug. And then
so what frequency range is it covering? Just stay there. So you're saying it's doing from how low?
Well, I don't have measurements published for that,
but this, the one that you had it on before, what was it doing?
It covers. So this is with a raw response on that 200 hertz horn. Right. So you can see there that it's it would typically cover, from 200 hertz up to around 800 hertz. So.
But is it because of that circuit that's on the driver able to do more than 800 hertz?
Put me on the spot here.
Yeah. Going back to a blog post from 6 months ago.
I would say that the impedance is helping within the operating bandwidth of the horn, because you can see here, this is typically what you see it droop down and then it immediately starts going up. Right. The inductive rise.
Inductive rise, yeah.
But
it's flat. It's
flat, right? And so you're going to get a number of improvements to the sound with that. So and so just with the phase plug that you saw that I showed you there, it's the horn ends up playing up to around 5K cleanly. Just when I say cleanly, I say subjectively. It's playing up to 5K cleanly as far as the sound quality. The phase plug is where with this project, I just basically mounted the horn, or mounted the driver right to the back of the horn. It had no phase plug. You can see it there. And so it was clean up to around 1 kilohertz. And then you started to hear some coloration as the sound kind of reflected inside that void that's directly in front of the driver, right? So the phase plug really cleans up. Now, this specific project, the crossover point is actually only going to be around 500 or 600 hertz. So this one's 500 or 600 hertz. That's how high it's going to play, from 150 up to 500. So it's a 4 or 5 way system. So yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, you can see the cone. You can see the cone in there, and then he's got the bullet phase plug with the fins. We cut the dust cap off, then that bullet actually goes right inside. So inside the voice coil former. So, and this, you compare that to like say an Altec A7 where you've got the sides of the woofer cut off and nothing is really technically in phase. Like there's a lot of mid bass horns where they're not even attempting to get a good phase alignment at the throat coming out of the horn. They're the throat and a time aligned wave front, so to speak. And this one worked out quite well. The same can't be said for what we discussed in the previous live, where we did that to a 5-inch tech stream driver, and for whatever reason it just had massive dips in the response, but this seems to not have the same issues with that. So it's, I guess my point in saying all of that is, if you are experimenting and testing and 3D printing your parts, and don't be discouraged if the first or the second try you end up with severe problems. Sometimes it just takes continuing, to experiment. Well, for example, the multi-cell, like we're on Gen 3, and finally it's a result where, we don't have any severe problems. It's now at the point where we can refine the design even further. Like we discussed even with the 1929, I think I still have it open here. Oh, that's the leg. The 3D printing has revolutionized not just this sector, but a number of sectors, to the point where
you can move fast and break things and try things. And I could imagine 20 years ago you'd have to get a mold made up, rapid prototype mold, and it would have been thousands and thousands of dollars only to find out it didn't work.
Yeah.
Where this is a game changer.
Yeah. So like, if I pull back the design tree here, and you can see, this is, now we're at the point where we can take it further and improve on, you know, you saw the response. It wasn't, you know,
Yeah, it wasn't picture perfect.
no, but, and so now I think we can get it to, we've achieved the target of what we're looking for. And then now we're just, the icing on the cake basically is getting it better and better by, you know, improving these to be a little more sharper and reprinting it in that way. But I mean, it's already there. So
yeah. If you guys have any suggestions or on what you think might sound better or what would be cool, let us know in the comments. I think that's pretty cool looking myself. It's pretty radical design.
Yeah, and you can go back into the tree here and just kind of see the construction of it, not to give away too much of how it's actually constructed, but it ends up resulting in some geometry. Let me just do something here, just for. I'll mirror this shape so that you can see kind of what I'm talking about, and this is more of the artistic side, where it just looks so cool and doesn't really form a function other than it being something of a statement.
So you're doubling up your design.
So this thing just looks insane.
So you could keep continuing the number of multi-cells is what you're saying.
No, the sound is coming out of this cell,
but not the other ones.
it's coming out of this cell,
Right.
but not this. Right. So this is just aesthetic.
Yeah, those are speed fins.
It just, yeah. I mean, you could make that look so cool sitting on top of a speaker, and especially if this was cast, right? Like cast bronze,
yeah,
with like a patina.
Yeah.
I mean, that would look amazing.
Yeah.
So there's potential there.
Okay. Yeah, if you have any other questions, let us know. I think we talked about quite a bit today. We will try and do one next weekend. Yes, no?
I'm
What's
traveling.
The plan? Are you?
The next live might be from British Columbia. I'm visiting some family.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I might do a live just with my phone. I won't have. I'll have my laptop actually, so I'll be able to do this still.
Yeah.
But
Well,
maybe.
I think this is the time of year where a lot of people have some time off and they can do some late night listening and just take some downtime and relax and enjoy some music and discover some new music that they haven't. I know the discovery sections on Spotify and Tidal and other things are amazing, where it'll suggest if you like this artist.
Curating in Spotify is interesting. Yeah.
So that's something.
I mean, we could talk a bit about our music preferences if anybody's interested. I just don't know.
Another episode.
Like we mentioned in the last live that music is a huge part of this, obviously. But if you're curious as to, you know, specific artists or specific tracks and that, just let us know. And
yeah.
So we think.
No, I think
wrap
that's
it
good.
up.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Please just provide some feedback on where you'd like the lives to go, and I'll try to accommodate. And by all means, ask a question and I'll try to answer. So take care.
Thank you.
Bye.